Chapter 20. Bach got up earlier than he wanted the next morning. While still somewhat tired, he was ready to get out of an unfamiliar bed. Yata would have cackled at that, for he always seemed to be the last one to the family's breakfast table. Of course, it didn't help that Kotarian snored as loudly as a hibernating bear in the next room over. Bach checked first on Corrigan, who thankfully remained asleep. Bach had looked in on the man several times during the night. The Yorka root appeared to be doing its work in easing his pain. The commander needed at least another week in bed, but Bach figured he had about as much chance of making that happen as a blacksmith's boy did of attending the Grand Merchant's Gala. Once in the hall, he noticed the door to Isabella and Aventil's room was cracked open. Inside, Isabella and Aventil cuddled together in their sleep, his arm draped across her waist. His face grew hot, and he quickly looked away. Alone in the summer morning quiet, Bach poured a glass of water and sat on the edge of his borrowed bed. Only those born to the noble class even had the potential to use the potent brand of magic, the type of magic that could create and destroy. How was I able to cast that spell? And could I do it again? In the life or death excitement of the previous day, no one had pressed him on it. He had been more concerned with keeping Aventil and Corrigan alive, and then Isabella needed him. And truth be told, he didn't want to consider what his actions at the Raybun Inn might indicate. Because the only possible explanation he could come up with would be if, somehow, he was not truly the son of Tana and Finn Omat. He knew his grandparents well enough to know his parents weren't secretly noble class themselves. That led him to the uncomfortable conclusion that his parents had misled him about his own origins. But serving class life, and his parents' love, was all he had ever known. Certainly they would not lie about something so important. Someone who knew more about high magic, Isabella, Tovano, or even Kotarian, surely could relieve those fears. He couldn't avoid the question any longer. He needed answers. Bach went downstairs thinking about who could provide it when, "Got a lot on your mind?" Tovano's voice startled Bach, as if Bach had conjured the elder mage simply by thinking of him. "I suppose I do," Bach whispered, not wanting to wake the others. "How did you know? Did you perform some sort of spell?" "Hardly." Tovano's wrinkle-creased face tightened into a smile. He took a deep sip of his sassafras tea. "If you've been around as long as I have, you learn to read people's faces. Yours tells me that you have many questions and few solutions. I think I know why. Come." He rose from his chair. "Let's go outside. I don't have all the answers you want, but maybe we can come up with some together." The hot morning air stuck to Bach's skin as they entered the estate's enclosed backyard. The grass came up over the men's ankles when they stomped into the middle of the yard, away from the house. Tovano whistled an old folk tune and fished a green apple from his pocket. "Am I supposed to do something with that apple?" Bach asked. "No, not at all. This is my post-breakfast snack." Tovano chomped into the apple. Between crunchy chews, he continued, "Now, I want you to do something with this." He tossed a small glass globe into the air as he walked into the yard, and motioned to Bach to follow. Tovano then slapped the top of an old oak stump with his weathered, skinny hand. "When you've been casting spells as long as I have, you can do plenty with a plain, everyday object like this." To illustrate his point, he threw the globe high into the air and quickly whispered a few words. It levitated at the apex of its ascent and took off sideways, zooming around the yard and slaloming between the backyard pine trees. Then, as quickly as it had started moving, the glass ball stopped again as it returned to the sorcerer's palm.
Now, if you get really old and bored, you can learn to do something like this.
Tovano spoke a different incantation, waved his other hand, and the globe vanished. Tovano pointed at a large rock around 100 feet away. The sphere rested safely in the grass in front of the rock.
That is amazing, Bach exclaimed.
Well, folk magic had its valuable uses. None of them were nearly as dramatic.
That is a transmission spell. The user can move an object across short distances instantaneously, even through walls. However, the spell can never be used on anything living.
Tovano shrugged his bony shoulders.
Transmission spells are never completely precise, to be honest with you. I was trying to place the globe on top of the rock, not in front of it. If I do that with a person, and they end up materializing inside a solid object, well, I think you understand why you can't transmit a living creature.
Bach nodded. I had no idea such things were possible, even through high magic.
Oh, this is just the beginning of what you can do with high magic.
Tovano finished the last bite of his apple and tossed the core into the grass.
But today, we are going to start with something much more basic. Do you remember the words to the push-pull spell you used last night?
Bach shuffled his feet. His breathing sped up. I believe so. Do you want me to try to use it on that stump?
Oh, no.
Tovano chuckled.
This stump is rooted deeply in the ground. I would be hard-pressed to animate it, and I've been doing this spell for more than 40 years.
Tovano placed the crystal sphere on top of the stump.
No. What I want you to do is to simply animate this globe. Don't worry if you can't hold it long. Just get it moving, if you can. And if you can't, then we'll consider last night up to one of those mysteries of life.
The more Tovano talked, the more skeptical Bach became that he could repeat this incredible feat. He wondered if his actions back at the inn were some once-in-a-lifetime fluke born of desperation, an answered prayer, or even a spell cast unknowingly by Isabella, some sort of self-defense reflex of a trained sorcerer. But I have to try the spell again. I must know for sure.
Just take it slowly, my young friend,
Tovano encouraged in a low, soothing voice. Bach closed his eyes and pictured each of the words to the spell in his mind. Word by word he spoke the incantation, carefully enunciating each syllable for fear of the sounds tingling on his tongue. His eyelids remained shut, but Bach could feel the invisible tendrils of magical energy snaking forward from his fingertips. They crawled across the ground and through the air toward the glass ball. He had experienced this sensation once before, when he willed the dresser to move across the room to save himself and his friends from mortal danger. Except this time, he was aware of what was happening and controlled the magic. He could almost understand why Kotarian carried himself as he did. Bach stretched his arms forward. The globe rolled, then dribbled, then bounced once, twice, and into the air. It hovered precariously an inch or two above the stump, like a baby bird pushed out of the nest to test its wings for the first time.
Right, right,
Tovano clapped softly.
Keep it going. Just a few more seconds.
Bach's strength ebbed. His outstretched arms ached under a phantom strain, as if he held Yata's hammer. Bach opened his eyes. The connection instantly severed, and gravity took its course. The globe dropped onto the stump with a thud, shattering when it struck the wood. I'm sorry about your globe, Tovano, Bach sputtered, hoping he hadn't broken a favorite heirloom.
Don't you worry about that. Cost me 2 silver at the Great Bazaar. They've got a whole table of them.
He walked a quick circle around the globe, making mental calculations of the height it reached and the time Bach held it in the air. He shook his head vigorously.
I say, that was quite a feat, my friend. How did you—
That's what you're supposed to tell me. Bach flexed his arms, trying to bring feeling back to his stiff muscles. Tovano continued to shake his head side to side.
By all rights, you shouldn't be able to do that, even if you are what I suspect.
What I suspect? I don't like the sound of those words. What do you suspect? What do you mean? Tovano put his hand on Bach's shoulder.
Come, let's go back in the house.
Bach started to object, but Tovano cut him off.
I know you want answers, but Princess Isabella must hear what we are about to discuss. Bach, your life is about to change. Nothing you've heard or experienced can prepare you for what you are about to hear. You are no longer a simple village healer. You soon will become one of the most important people in Imarina.